The alarm clock rang at 5 in the morning, just like it did every single day. The teenager reached over and turned it off quickly, not wanting to wake his younger sister who slept in the room next door. He rubbed his eyes and sat up in bed, feeling the tiredness in his bones. But he couldn't stay in bed. He had work to do. He got dressed in the dark, putting on his work uniform from the diner. The shirt was a bit worn out now, with small stains that wouldn't come out no matter how many times his mother washed it. But it was clean, and that was what mattered. He grabbed his backpack and quietly walked downstairs, careful not to make any noise on the creaky steps. His mother was already in the kitchen making coffee. She looked tired too. She worked 2 jobs herself, trying to keep their small family going after his father had left them 3 years ago. She smiled when she saw him, that warm smile that always made him feel like everything would be okay. "You're up early again," she said softly, pouring him a cup of orange juice. "You need to rest more, baby. You're working too hard." He shook his head and smiled back at her. "I'm fine, Mom. Just a few more months and I'll have enough money. Then I can buy a car and help you more. I can drive my sister to school. I can take you to work. We won't have to take the bus anymore in the cold or rain." His mother's eyes got a little watery, but she blinked the tears away. She was proud of him. He knew that. But she also worried about him. He was only 17 years old and he was working like a grown man. But he had a dream, and nothing was going to stop him. He worked at the diner from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. He washed dishes, cleaned tables, and sometimes helped in the kitchen when they were busy. The work was hard and his hands were always red and rough from the hot water and soap. But his boss was kind and the other workers treated him well. They knew he was saving for something important. After his shift at the diner, he would rush home, change his clothes, and grab his lawnmower. From 3 in the afternoon until it got dark, he mowed lawns in the neighborhood. He had about 15 regular customers, mostly older people who couldn't do the work themselves anymore. They paid him $20 or $30 each time, and some of them gave him cold lemonade or cookies while he worked. Mrs. Johnson, who lived 3 blocks away, always asked him about his car fund. "How much more do you need, sweetie?" she would ask, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "I'm getting close, Mrs. Johnson," he would tell her. "Maybe 2 more months." She would pat his arm and slip an extra $10 into his hand. "Don't tell Mr. Johnson," she would whisper with a wink. After mowing lawns, he would go home for a quick dinner with his family. His mother always made sure there was food on the table, even if it was just rice and beans or pasta. They would sit together, his mother, his little sister, and him, and talk about their day. His sister was 12 years old and full of energy. She would tell funny stories about school, and he would laugh until his stomach hurt. Then, at 7 in the evening, he would put on another uniform. This one was red and had the name of the grocery store on it. He worked at the store from 7 until midnight, stocking shelves, helping customers, and cleaning up. By the time he got home, it was almost 1 in the morning. He would do his homework quickly, sometimes falling asleep at his desk with his pen still in his hand. He did this every single day, Monday through Sunday. While his friends were hanging out at the mall or playing video games or going to parties, he was working. They would call him sometimes asking him to come out. "Come on, man," his best friend Jake would say. "You never hang out anymore. What's the point of being young if you're always working?" But he would just smile and shake his head. "I have a goal, Jake. When I get my car, then we can hang out more." I promise. The months went by like this. Summer turned into fall and fall turned into winter. His hands got more calluses. His body got stronger from all the physical work. And his bank account grew slowly but surely. He kept a notebook under his bed where he wrote down every single dollar he earned and every dollar he spent. He watched that number climb higher and higher. $2,000. $3,000. $4,000. He dreamed about cars every night. He looked at pictures online during his breaks at work. He watched videos about engines and transmissions and how to fix things. He learned the difference between a carburetor and fuel injection. He memorized what every part of a car was called and what it did. He became obsessed. His teachers at school noticed that he was tired all the time. One of them, Mr. Rodriguez, pulled him aside one day after class. "Are you okay?" Mr. Rodriguez asked with concern in his voice. "You fell asleep during the lesson again today." He felt embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Mr. Rodriguez, I'm working a lot. I'm saving up for a car." Mr. Rodriguez studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That's admirable. But don't forget about your education. You need to graduate. A car won't help you if you don't finish school. I know, sir. I'm keeping my grades up. I promise, and he was. Despite being exhausted all the time, despite having no free time, despite missing out on being a normal teenager, he kept his grades up. He did his homework. He studied for tests. He was determined to do everything right. Finally, after 2 years of working 3 jobs, after saving every penny he could, after saying no to movies and games and fun with his friends, he counted his money one more time. He had $5,200. It wasn't a lot, but it was enough. It had to be enough. He went online and started looking at cars for sale. He knew he couldn't afford anything fancy. He knew he wouldn't be driving a sports car or a luxury vehicle. But that was okay. He just needed something reliable, something that would run, something that was his. He found a listing for a 1995 Honda Civic. The car was old and the pictures showed that it wasn't in great shape. The paint was peeling off in several places. There was a crack in the windshield. The seats had tears in them. But the seller said it ran and the price was $4,800. He called the number and talked to the owner, an older man who sounded honest. They agreed to meet the next day. The teenager could barely sleep that night. He tossed and turned, imagining what it would feel like to finally have his own car, to finally achieve the goal he had worked so hard for. The next morning, his mother went with him to see the car. When they arrived at the address, his heart sank a little. The car looked worse in person than it did in the pictures. It was rusty. The engine made strange noises. One of the doors was a different color than the rest of the car. But when he sat in the driver's seat and turned the key, the engine started. It sputtered and coughed, but it ran. He looked at his mother and she looked back at him with understanding in her eyes. "It's your choice, baby," she said quietly. "You worked for this money. You decide." He looked at the car again. It wasn't his dream car, but it was a start. And he suddenly realized something. He could learn on this car. He could fix it. He could make it better. This wasn't just a car. This was a project. This was a challenge. He smiled and turned to the seller. "I'll take it." 3 months had passed since he bought the Honda Civic. He had named it Phoenix, written in white paint marker on a piece of cardboard that he kept on his dashboard. The name meant something to him. A phoenix was a bird that rose from the ashes, born again, stronger than before. That's what he wanted for this car. That's what he wanted for himself. Every spare dollar he earned now went into fixing the car. He bought a repair manual and kept it in the back seat. He watched countless videos on his phone, learning how to change the oil, replace the brake pads, fix the electrical problems. His hands, already rough from work, now had permanent grease stains under the fingernails. But he didn't mind. He was learning. He was building something. The driveway of their small house became his workshop. He would come home from his jobs and spend hours under the car, fixing things with basic tools he had collected. His neighbors would walk by and see him there, his legs sticking out from under the vehicle, and they would shake their heads. Some of them made comments. "That old thing will never be worth the effort," one neighbor said, but he ignored them. He had a vision. He knew what Phoenix could become. On this particular Saturday afternoon, he was driving to the auto parts store on the other side of town. He needed a new air filter and some engine cleaner. The store in the wealthy neighborhood had better prices than the one near his house, so he decided to make the drive even though it meant going through areas where he normally didn't go. The houses in this part of town were huge. They had perfectly cut green lawns and expensive cars parked in the driveways. Mercedes, BMW, Tesla. He looked at them as he drove past, not with jealousy, but with curiosity. He wondered what it was like to just buy a car like that without working for years and years. His Civic made its usual noises as he drove. The engine was louder than it should be. He knew that. He was saving up to fix the exhaust system, but that would have to wait a few more paychecks. For now, the car ran, and that was good enough. He came to a stop sign and pressed the brake. The car slowed down, but as it did, the engine backfired. It was a loud bang that sounded like a small explosion. Black smoke puffed out from the exhaust pipe. He winced. That was embarrassing. He made a mental note to fix that problem sooner rather than later, but the backfire had caught someone's attention. In his rearview mirror, he saw a police car that had been parked on the side of the street. The officer inside was looking right at him. A moment later, the police car's lights turned on, flashing red and blue. His heart started beating faster. He had never been pulled over before. He had his license. The car was registered. Everything was legal. But he was still nervous. He carefully pulled over to the curb and put the car in park. His hands were shaking a little as he placed them on the steering wheel where the officer could see them, just like his mother had taught him. The police officer got out of his car and walked slowly toward the Civic. The teenager could see him in the side mirror. The officer was tall and broad, with dark sunglasses covering his eyes. He had a serious expression on his face that made the teenager's stomach twist with worry. The officer reached the window, and the teenager quickly rolled it down. The window crank was broken, so he had to roll it down manually, which made an awful grinding sound. The officer watched this with raised eyebrows. "License and registration," the officer said. His voice was flat and cold. "Yes, sir," the teenager replied, his voice coming out smaller than he wanted it to. He reached over to the glove compartment and pulled out the papers. His hands were still shaking as he handed them over along with his driver's license. The officer took the documents and looked at them carefully. He looked at the license, then at the teenager's face, then back at the license. He seemed to be taking his time on purpose. Finally, he looked at the registration and studied it for a long moment. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" the officer asked. I think my car backfired, sir," the teenager answered honestly. "I'm working on fixing that. I have the parts ordered." The officer didn't respond to that. Instead, he started walking around the car slowly, looking at it from every angle. The teenager sat in the driver's seat, not sure what to do. He kept his hands on the steering wheel and watched in his mirrors as the officer circled the vehicle. When the officer came back to the window, there was something different in his expression. It wasn't just serious anymore. There was a smirk on his face, like he found something funny. The teenager didn't understand what was amusing about the situation. "What's a car like this doing in this neighborhood?" the officer asked. The way he said it made it clear it wasn't really a question. It was an accusation. I'm going to the auto parts store, sir," the teenager explained. "They have good prices there." The officer leaned down so his face was level with the window. "This thing sounds like it's about to fall apart. You're practically driving a safety hazard. You know that?" The teenager felt his face get hot. "I'm working on it, sir. It's a project. I'm restoring it," the officer laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was mocking. "Restoring it? Kid, this is a piece of junk. You should be embarrassed driving something like this around." The words hit him like a punch in the stomach. He had worked so hard for this car. He had given up 2 years of his life, working 3 jobs, missing out on everything teenagers were supposed to do. And now this officer was standing here making fun of him, calling his dream a piece of junk. "It's not junk, sir," he said quietly, trying to keep his voice steady. "I bought it with my own money. Money I earned working. I'm learning how to fix it myself." But the officer wasn't listening. He was pointing at different parts of the car now, his voice getting louder so that people walking by on the sidewalk could hear. "Look at this rust. Look at this mismatched door. Is that duct tape holding your mirror on?" The officer laughed again. "This is ridiculous. Where did you even get this thing? A junkyard?" Cars were slowing down as they passed. People were staring. The teenager could see them looking at him, judging him. He felt smaller and smaller with each word the officer spoke. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to drive away. But he couldn't. He had to sit there and take it. "Let me guess," the officer continued, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think you're some kind of street racer? You think this piece of junk is fast?" "No, sir," the teenager said, his voice barely above a whisper now. I just needed a car. To help my family." The officer ignored him. "This thing couldn't win a race against a bicycle. Actually, a bicycle would probably be safer. And quieter." He seemed proud of his joke. A woman walking her dog stopped on the sidewalk to watch. A man in an expensive suit slowed his Mercedes to look at the scene. The teenager could see someone in another car holding up their phone, probably recording a video. The humiliation burned in his chest like fire. "Do yourself a favor, kid," the officer said loudly, making sure his voice carried to the growing audience. "Take the bus until you can afford a real car. You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassing everyone who has to look at this thing." The teenager's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. He felt tears trying to push their way out of his eyes, but he refused to cry. Not here, not in front of all these people. Not in front of this officer who seemed to enjoy making him feel worthless. He thought about all those mornings waking up at 5 a.m., all those nights coming home at 1 in the morning, all the times he said no to his friends, all the birthday parties he missed, all the school dances he skipped, every single sacrifice he had made for this car. And now this stranger was telling him it was all for nothing, that his dream was garbage, that he should be ashamed. The officer walked around the car one more time, taking his time, making the teenager sit there in his shame for as long as possible. When he came back to the window, he pulled out his citation book. The officer flipped open his citation book with a sharp snap that made the teenager flinch. He pulled out a pen and started writing, taking his time with each letter, each number. The teenager watched this happening and felt his stomach drop. Citations meant money. Money he didn't have. Money that should go toward fixing Phoenix. Money his family needed for food and rent. "Sir, please," he started to say, but the officer held up one hand to silence him. "I'm writing you up for several violations," the officer said, not looking up from his book. "Excessive noise. Possible environmental hazard from that smoke. We'll see what else I can find." More cars were slowing down now. The teenager could hear people talking, though he couldn't make out the words. He felt like he was in a spotlight, like he was on a stage performing the worst moment of his life for an audience that wouldn't stop growing. The officer walked to the back of the car, bending down to look at the license plate. "This plate is pretty dirty," he called out. "Hard to read." "That's another violation." The teenager wanted to explain that he had just driven through a puddle yesterday, that the plate was dirty because he was driving the car every day to get to work, to get to school, to help his mother with groceries. But he knew it wouldn't matter. The officer had decided that he was someone to be mocked, someone to be made an example of. A woman pushing a stroller stopped nearby. She was dressed in expensive yoga clothes, and she stared at the scene with a mixture of curiosity and disgust. The teenager saw her pull out her phone and angle it toward him. Another person recording. Another piece of evidence of his humiliation that would probably end up on social media. The officer came back to the driver's side, but this time he didn't lean down. He stood up straight, looking down at the teenager like he was something dirty on the bottom of his shoe. "Pop the hood," the officer commanded. "I want to see what kind of disaster is under there." The teenager's hands were shaking badly now, but he reached down and pulled the hood release lever. He heard the click, and the officer walked to the front of the car. He lifted the hood and propped it open with the metal rod. From his seat, the teenager couldn't see what the officer was doing, but he could hear him making sounds. Little grunts of disapproval. Clicks of his tongue. At one point, the officer actually laughed out loud. "You've got to be kidding me," the officer's voice carried from the front of the car. "This engine is held together with hope and prayer." A few people on the sidewalk actually laughed at that. The teenager felt his face burning hotter. He stared straight ahead, trying not to make eye contact with anyone. He wished he could become invisible. He wished he had never driven through this neighborhood. He wished he had just stayed home. The officer slammed the hood closed, and the teenager jumped at the loud bang. The officer walked back to the window, shaking his head like he had just witnessed something unbelievable. "I found at least 3 more problems under there," the officer said. "Loose belts, corroded battery terminals, some wires that look like they might be a fire hazard." He started writing in his citation book again. "I should probably have this car towed away before it becomes a danger to other drivers." The teenager's eyes went wide. "No, please," he said, and this time his voice cracked with emotion. "Please don't tow my car. I need it. I need it to get to work. My family needs me to work." The officer looked at him for a long moment, and the teenager thought maybe, just maybe, he had gotten through to him. Maybe the officer would show some mercy. But then the officer smiled that same mocking smile. "Should have thought about that before you bought a junk pile," he said. An older man in an expensive suit had stopped his car in the middle of the street to watch. He rolled down his window and called out to the officer. "Everything okay here, officer?" The officer turned and waved at him. "Just fine, sir. Just dealing with a kid who thinks he can drive a piece of trash through a nice neighborhood." The man in the suit nodded like this made perfect sense and drove away. The teenager felt like the whole world was against him. These people with their nice cars and nice clothes and nice houses, they didn't understand. They had never had to work 3 jobs just to afford something old and broken. They had never had to learn how to fix things themselves because they couldn't afford to pay someone else to do it. Another police car pulled up behind the first one. The teenager's heart sank even lower. A second officer got out, a younger one, and walked over to his partner. "What's going on?" the second officer asked. "Just having some fun with this kid and his clunker," the first officer said, loud enough for the teenager to hear. They both laughed. The second officer walked around the car doing his own inspection. "Wow," he said. "I haven't seen a car this bad in a long time." "Does it even run?" "Barely," the first officer answered. "Listen to this." He turned to the teenager. "Start your engine." The teenager didn't want to. He knew what would happen, but he didn't have a choice. With a shaking hand, he turned the key. Phoenix's engine coughed and sputtered to life, making all its usual noises plus a few new ones from the stress of the situation. Both officers started laughing. The second officer pulled out his own phone and started recording a video of the running engine. "This is unbelievable," he said, still laughing. "My followers are going to love this." The teenager turned off the engine and put his forehead against the steering wheel. He couldn't do this anymore. The humiliation was too much. His chest felt tight and his breathing was coming fast and shallow. He thought about his mother, about how disappointed she would be if she saw this, about his little sister, who thought he was so cool for having his own car, about all his coworkers and friends who had been proud of him. "Hey, don't cry now," the first officer said, noticing the teenager's posture. "We're just giving you some honest feedback. Someone needs to tell you the truth about this death trap you're driving." A small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk now, maybe 10 or 12 people, all watching, all judging. Some were clearly entertained by the show. Others looked uncomfortable but didn't walk away. No one stepped forward to defend him. No one told the officers to stop. No one said this wasn't right. The teenager lifted his head from the steering wheel and looked straight ahead through the cracked windshield. He noticed that one of the houses across the street had security cameras pointed at the street. At least there would be a record of this, he thought. Not that it mattered. Not that anyone would care. The first officer was still writing citations. The teenager had stopped counting how many. Each piece of paper the officer filled out was another bill he would have to pay. Another week of work just to cover fines instead of fixing his car. Another setback in his dream. A fancy sports car drove by slowly and the driver honked the horn and laughed out the window. "Nice ride, buddy," he yelled sarcastically before speeding away. The teenager closed his eyes. He tried to remember why he had worked so hard. He tried to remember the feeling of pride when he first bought Phoenix. He tried to remember his dreams of fully restoring the car, of making it beautiful, of proving everyone wrong. But right now, in this moment, those dreams felt very far away. They felt impossible. "You know what?" the first officer said, looking at the teenager with something almost like pity now, but pity mixed with contempt. "I'm going to tell you something, and you should listen carefully. Some people are meant to drive nice cars and some people aren't. Some people have the money and the taste to own something decent, and some people should stick to public transportation. That's just how the world works." The words cut deep because they spoke to the teenager's deepest fears. The fear that maybe he wasn't good enough. That maybe no matter how hard he worked, he would never have nice things. That maybe he was foolish to dream bigger than his circumstances. The teenager sat in silence, staring at his hands on the steering wheel. The officer was still writing, filling out what looked like the 4th or 5th citation. The crowd on the sidewalk had grown even larger. Some people were recording on their phones. Others were just watching like this was some kind of street performance. No one was helping. No one was saying this was wrong. Then he heard it. A deep, powerful rumbling sound that was nothing like Phoenix's struggling engine. It was the sound of a serious machine. A beast of a car that commanded respect just by existing. The sound got louder and everyone turned to look. A black Dodge Charger SRT Hellcat rolled down the street and slowed to a stop behind the 2 police cars. The car was absolutely beautiful. The paint was so shiny it looked like glass. The chrome wheels caught the sunlight and sparkled. The teenager could hear the engine purring, a perfect mechanical symphony that made Phoenix's coughing sound like a joke in comparison. But he wasn't jealous. Even in his miserable state, he could appreciate the beauty of a well-maintained machine. This was what he dreamed Phoenix could become one day. Not exactly like this, but something that ran smoothly. Something that looked cared for. Something that made people stop and admire instead of mock. The driver's door of the Charger opened and a man stepped out. He was tall and muscular, wearing a simple black t-shirt and jeans. He had a shaved head and a strong presence that made people pay attention. The teenager didn't recognize him at first. He was too focused on his own misery to really look, but the crowd recognized him. He heard gasps and whispers running through the people on the sidewalk. Is that Vin Diesel? Oh my God, it is. It's really him. What's he doing here? The teenager looked up properly then and his eyes widened. It was actually him. Vin Diesel, the movie star, the Fast and Furious guy, the man who had made movies about cars and family and never giving up. What was he doing here? Vin Diesel walked toward the scene with purposeful strides. He had noticed the crowd, the police cars, the teenager sitting in his beat-up Civic, and something about the situation had made him stop. His expression was serious, not angry, but definitely not happy. The first officer turned around when he heard the whispers, and his whole body language changed immediately. His back straightened. His mocking smile disappeared. He suddenly looked professional, like he had been professional this whole time, like he hadn't just spent 15 minutes humiliating a teenage kid. Mr. Diesel, the officer said, and his voice was completely different now. It was respectful, almost nervous. What a surprise. Is there something I can help you with? Vin Diesel walked right past the officer without answering him. He walked straight to the teenager's car and looked at it with careful eyes. Not mocking eyes, not judging eyes, but the eyes of someone who understood cars, who knew what he was looking at. The teenager didn't know what to do. Should he get out of the car? Should he stay sitting? Should he say something? His mind was spinning. This was the most surreal moment of his entire life. 1 minute he was being humiliated by a police officer, and the next minute a Hollywood movie star was standing next to his car. Vin Diesel walked slowly around the Civic, just like the officer had done, but completely differently. His hand ran along the hood gently, like he was petting a dog. He bent down and looked at the wheels. He checked the bodywork. He even got down on one knee to look underneath the car. The expensive jeans he was wearing touched the dirty street, but he didn't seem to care. Finally, Vin Diesel came to the driver's side window and looked directly at the teenager. His eyes were kind. There was no judgment in them, no mockery, just curiosity and something that looked like understanding. How long have you had this car? Vin Diesel asked. His voice was even deeper in person than it sounded in movies. It was the kind of voice that made you pay attention. The teenager swallowed hard. His throat was dry.
3 months, sir, he managed to say. Did you buy it yourself?
Vin Diesel asked. The teenager nodded. Yes, sir. I worked 3 jobs for 2 years to save up the money. Something changed in Vin Diesel's expression. His eyes got a little softer, a little warmer. 3 jobs? How old are you? 17, sir. Vin Diesel nodded slowly, like this confirmed something he had been thinking. He looked at the car again, then back at the teenager. And you've been working on it yourself, haven't you? Learning as you go? The teenager felt tears trying to come again, but for a different reason this time. Someone understood. Someone actually saw what he was trying to do. Yes, sir. I watch videos online. I bought a repair manual. I'm trying to restore it. It's slow, but I'm learning. What's the car's name? Vin Diesel asked. The teenager felt embarrassed for a second, but then he pointed to the cardboard on the dashboard. Phoenix, sir. Like the bird that rises from the ashes. Vin Diesel's face broke into a genuine smile. It was a warm smile, a proud smile. That's perfect, he said. He turned to look at the officer and his smile disappeared. Officer, is there a problem here? The first officer stepped forward holding his citation book. His whole attitude had changed completely. He was practically standing at attention. No problem at all, Mr. Diesel, just a routine traffic stop. The vehicle made some excessive noise and I was performing a safety inspection. A safety inspection, Vin Diesel repeated slowly. He looked at the second officer who was still holding his phone. And you were recording it for what reason? Official police documentation. The second officer quickly put his phone away, his face turning red. You were just making fun of a kid. Vin Diesel finished the sentence. His voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. I heard what you said. I heard how you talked to him. I heard you laugh. The first officer opened his mouth to say something, but Vin Diesel held up his hand. I'm not done. He turned back to the teenager's car and raised his voice so the whole crowd could hear him. Do you all know what I see here? The crowd was completely silent now. Everyone was watching. Everyone was listening. The people who had been recording now turned their cameras toward Vin Diesel instead of the teenager. "I see a 17-year-old kid who worked 3 jobs for 2 years," Vin Diesel said clearly. "I see someone who saved every penny. I see someone who bought this car with his own money. Money he earned through hard work and sacrifice. I see someone who could have given up when he realized the car wasn't perfect, but instead he decided to learn how to fix it himself." He walked around the car again, this time pointing out things. "I see someone who is teaching himself mechanics. I see someone who named his car Phoenix because he believes in resurrection and transformation. I see someone who has more dedication and work ethic than most adults I know." The teenager felt his chest tighten, but in a good way this time. Someone saw him. Someone understood. Someone believed in what he was doing. Vin Diesel turned to face the officers and the crowd. "This isn't a piece of junk. This is a dream under construction. This is potential. This is exactly how every single person who loves cars started out, including me," the crowd was murmuring now. People were nodding. The woman with the yoga clothes looked ashamed and put her phone away. The man who had been laughing earlier had disappeared. "My first car was worse than this," Vin Diesel continued. "Way worse. It barely ran. The doors didn't lock. The windows didn't roll down. But I loved that car because it was mine, and because every time I fixed something on it I learned something new. Every person who has ever loved cars started somewhere. You don't mock someone for where they start. You respect the journey." Vin Diesel walked back to the teenager's window and gestured for him to roll it down more. The grinding sound of the manual window crank seemed louder in the silence that had fallen over the crowd. When the window was fully down, Vin Diesel leaned in slightly, his expression serious but kind. "Tell me about your jobs," he said. "All 3 of them." The teenager was surprised by the question, but something about Vin Diesel's genuine interest made him want to answer. "I work at a diner in the morning, washing dishes and cleaning tables. Then I mow lawns in the afternoon. At night I stock shelves at a grocery store." "Every day?" Vin Diesel asked. "Yes, sir. 7 days a week. And school?" "I'm a senior in high school. I do my homework late at night after I get home from the store." Vin Diesel stood up straight and looked at the crowd, then at the officers. His voice was strong when he spoke. "So while most kids his age are playing video games and hanging out at the mall, this young man is working 3 jobs and going to school. While most teenagers are asking their parents for money, he's earning his own. While most people his age are taking the easy road, he's taking the hard one. And what does he get for it? He gets mocked. He gets humiliated. He gets made to feel ashamed of his hard work." The first officer shifted his weight uncomfortably. He tried to speak. "Mr. Diesel, I was just concerned about safety." "Don't," Vin Diesel cut him off. His voice wasn't angry, but it was firm. "I heard what you said. I heard how you said it. That wasn't about safety. That was about making yourself feel big by making someone else feel small. And that's not what officers are supposed to do. You're supposed to protect and serve, not bully and embarrass." The crowd was completely focused on Vin Diesel now. Some people were nodding in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable, probably realizing they had been part of the problem by watching and doing nothing, or worse, by recording and laughing. Vin Diesel turned back to the teenager. "Get out of the car for a second. I want to look at something." The teenager's hands were shaking as he opened the door. The hinges creaked loudly. He stepped out onto the street and suddenly he was standing face to face with Vin Diesel. The movie star was taller than he expected, more real than he seemed on screen. "Pop the hood again," Vin Diesel said. The teenager reached inside and pulled the lever. Vin Diesel walked to the front of the car and lifted the hood, propping it open. He leaned in close, studying the engine with the careful attention of someone who truly understood what he was looking at. His hands touched different parts, checking connections, looking at the condition of various components. "Who taught you to work on cars?" Vin Diesel asked, his head still under the hood. "Nobody, sir," the teenager answered. "I'm teaching myself. YouTube videos mostly. And I bought a repair manual." Vin Diesel pulled his head out from under the hood and looked at the teenager with something that looked like respect. "You did all this work yourself? The belt replacement? The wiring repairs?" The teenager nodded, feeling a small spark of pride for the first time since the traffic stop began. "Yes, sir. It's not perfect. I know there's still a lot wrong with it. But I'm fixing things one at a time as I can afford the parts." "This is impressive," Vin Diesel said, and he wasn't just being nice. His voice carried real admiration. A lot of people wouldn't even know where to start. You're learning a valuable skill. You're learning patience, problem solving, mechanical understanding. These things will serve you for the rest of your life. He closed the hood gently and turned to address everyone watching. The crowd had grown even larger. People from nearby houses had come out to see what was happening. Cars had pulled over. Everyone wanted to see why Vin Diesel was stopped on their street. I started just like this, Vin Diesel told the crowd. My first car was a beat-up old sedan that my family helped me get. It was old, it was loud, and it broke down all the time. But I loved that car. I spent every free moment working on it, learning about engines, figuring out how things connected and why they worked the way they did. He walked around the Civic again, this time pointing out things to the crowd like he was giving a lesson. Look at this repair here. See how he replaced this belt? That's not easy to do. You have to understand tension. You have to know the routing pattern. And here, look at how he fixed this wiring. It's not factory perfect, but it works. That shows resourcefulness. That shows intelligence. The teenager felt his eyes getting watery again, but this time from gratitude. Someone understood. Someone saw value in what he was doing. Someone believed in him. Vin Diesel walked over to the first officer who was still holding his citation book. How many tickets were you going to give him? The officer looked down at his book, then back up at Vin Diesel. His face was red now. He knew that dozens of people were recording this interaction, that it would probably be all over the internet in a few hours. I was documenting several violations. For what? Vin Diesel asked. For having a loud car that he's actively working to fix? For being young and not rich? For having dreams that don't match his current circumstances? The officer didn't answer. He couldn't answer. There was no good answer. Vin Diesel's voice got softer but more intense. Let me tell you something about character. Real character isn't shown when you have everything handed to you. It's not shown when you drive a brand new car that daddy bought for you. Real character is shown when you work 3 jobs at 17 years old, when you sacrifice your teenage years to achieve a goal, when you don't give up even when the thing you worked for isn't perfect. He pointed to the teenager. This kid has more character in his little finger than most people develop in their entire lives. And instead of encouraging him, instead of respecting his work ethic and his dedication, you chose to tear him down. Why, to feel powerful? To get a laugh? The second officer, the younger one who had been recording, spoke up quietly. We didn't mean anything by it. It was just, the car's pretty rough. The car's a work in progress, Vin Diesel corrected him. There's a difference. Everything great starts rough. Every success story begins with struggle. Every person you admire went through a phase where they were learning, where they weren't perfect yet, where they were trying and failing and trying again. He turned to look at his own Charger gleaming in the sunlight. You think I just bought that car and that was it? No, I spent years learning about cars. I made mistakes. I fixed things wrong and had to do them over. I bought parts that didn't fit. I watched countless hours of videos and read dozens of manuals. The only difference between me and this young man is time and experience. But the heart, the dedication, the willingness to work, he's got all of that. The crowd was completely silent. The teenager could see that some people looked ashamed. The woman with the yoga clothes had tears in her eyes. An older man in the crowd was nodding his head like he understood what Vin Diesel was saying. Vin Diesel walked back to the teenager and put a hand on his shoulder. The touch was warm, supportive, almost fatherly. What's your name? He asked quietly. The teenager told him, his voice stronger now than it had been. How much longer until you finish high school? Vin Diesel asked. 6 months, sir. I graduate in the spring. And what do you want to do after that? The teenager hesitated. His dreams felt small and foolish in front of all these people. But Vin Diesel's encouraging expression made him brave. I want to be a mechanic, sir. Or maybe something with cars. Design or restoration or engineering. I'm not exactly sure yet, but something with cars. That's what I love. Vin Diesel smiled, a big, genuine smile that made his whole face light up. That's perfect. That's exactly the kind of clarity people need. You know what you love and you're already working toward it. Do you know how rare that is? Most people spend their whole lives trying to figure out what they're passionate about. You already know. Vin Diesel pulled out his phone and stepped away from the teenager for a moment, making a call. The teenager stood there awkwardly, not sure what to do. The crowd was still watching, but the energy had completely changed. People weren't laughing anymore. They weren't recording to mock him. Some were actually smiling at him, giving him encouraging nods. The first officer had put away his citation book. He stood near his police car, looking uncomfortable. The second officer was scrolling through his phone, probably deleting the video he had recorded earlier. After a few minutes, Vin Diesel came back with a huge smile on his face. "Okay," he said, "I just made some calls. I want to do something for you if you're willing." The teenager's heart started beating faster. "What do you mean, sir?" "There's a technical college about 20 minutes from here. They have one of the best automotive programs in the state. It's a 2-year program that teaches everything from basic mechanics to advanced engineering, from restoration to modern electric vehicles. The problem is it's expensive. But I just got off the phone with the director, and I've arranged for you to get a full scholarship." The teenager's mouth fell open. He couldn't speak. He couldn't even think. A scholarship? To study what he loved? This couldn't be real. "You'll start after you graduate high school," Vin Diesel continued. "The program includes not just classes but hands-on experience. You'll work on real cars. You'll learn from professionals. And when you finish, you'll have a certification that will help you get a job anywhere you want." Tears were running down the teenager's face now, and he didn't even try to stop them. I don't know what to say. Thank you. Thank you so much." But Vin Diesel held up his hand. "I'm not done. I also want to help you with Phoenix. I have a restoration shop and I'm going to connect you with my team. They're going to help you get the parts you need at cost, and they're going to give you guidance on your restoration project. I want to see this through with you." The teenager couldn't hold back anymore. He started crying for real, his shoulders shaking. All the stress from the last 2 years, all the humiliation from the traffic stop, all the relief and gratitude and disbelief, it all came pouring out. Vin Diesel pulled him into a hug, and the teenager cried on the shoulder of a Hollywood movie star in the middle of a wealthy neighborhood street. "It's okay," Vin Diesel said quietly. "You earned this. You worked for this. I'm just helping you get where you're already trying to go." When the teenager finally pulled back, wiping his eyes with his sleeve, he saw that many people in the crowd were crying too. The woman with the yoga clothes was openly sobbing. An older man was wiping his eyes. Even some of the tough-looking guys who had been watching were looking emotional. Vin Diesel pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to the teenager. "This is my assistant's number. Call tomorrow and we'll set everything up. The scholarship, the connection with my shop, all of it. And I want you to keep me updated on Phoenix's progress. I want to see pictures as you restore it. Can you do that?" The teenager nodded, clutching the business card like it was made of gold. "Yes, sir, absolutely, I promise." Vin Diesel turned to the officers. The first officer looked like he wanted to disappear. His face was red and he couldn't meet Vin Diesel's eyes. "I hope you both learned something today," Vin Diesel said to them. "This young man did nothing wrong. He was driving to buy parts to improve his car. He was following all the traffic laws. The only thing he was guilty of was being young and not wealthy. That's not a crime. That's not something to mock." The first officer nodded slowly. "You're right. I apologize." He turned to the teenager. "I'm sorry for how I spoke to you. That was wrong. I let my own prejudices get in the way of doing my job correctly." The teenager was surprised. He never expected an apology. "Thank you, sir," he said quietly. The second officer also apologized, looking genuinely ashamed. "I deleted that video, and I'm sorry for laughing. What you're doing is actually really cool." Vin Diesel nodded, accepting their apologies. Then he turned to the crowd. "I want all of you to remember something. When you see someone struggling, when you see someone working with what they have instead of what they wish they had, don't mock them. Don't judge them. Support them. Encourage them. You never know who you're looking at. You never know what someone's story is. You never know how hard they've worked to get where they are." He pointed to the teenager. This young man could be a famous mechanic someday. He could design cars for major companies. He could open his own restoration business. He could do anything. And when he succeeds, I hope everyone here remembers this day. I hope you remember that you saw his beginning. And I hope you feel proud that you were part of his story. The crowd actually applauded. People were clapping and some were cheering. The teenager felt overwhelmed. An hour ago, he had been at his lowest point, feeling worthless and ashamed. Now he was being celebrated by a street full of strangers and a Hollywood celebrity. Vin Diesel walked to his Charger and opened the trunk. He pulled out a large toolbox, a professional set that looked expensive. He carried it over to the teenager. I want you to have this. Every mechanic needs good tools. This was my first professional set. I've had it for 20 years, but I've upgraded since then. I think it should go to someone who will appreciate it and use it the way it's meant to be used. The teenager couldn't believe it. The toolbox was beautiful, filled with every tool he could imagine needing. Wrenches, sockets, screwdrivers, everything organized perfectly. I can't accept this, he started to say. You can and you will, Vin Diesel said firmly. Consider it an investment. I'm investing in your future. Someday, when you're successful, you can help someone else the way I'm helping you. That's how this works. That's what family does. The word family hit the teenager hard. Family. He thought about his mother working 2 jobs, his little sister who believed in him, and now this stranger who had stopped to defend him, to lift him up, to change his life. That was family too, in a way. Family wasn't just blood. It was people who saw your value and helped you reach your potential. I'll make you proud, the teenager promised, his voice shaking with emotion. I swear I'll work hard. I'll finish the program. I'll restore Phoenix. I'll make something of myself. Vin Diesel smiled and shook his hand. I already know you will. You've been working hard your whole life. You're not going to stop now. Before he got back in his car, Vin Diesel turned to the crowd one more time. I want everyone here to follow this young man's journey. When he finishes restoring Phoenix, when he graduates from the technical college, when he starts his career, I'm going to share his story. And I want all of you to share it too, because the world needs to see stories like this. The world needs to know that hard work matters, that dedication pays off, that you should never give up on your dreams no matter what other people say. He looked at the teenager one more time. Stay strong, keep working, and remember this feeling the next time someone tries to make you feel small. You're not small. You're going to be great. With that, Vin Diesel got into his Charger and drove away, the powerful engine rumbling as he disappeared down the street. The crowd slowly dispersed, but many people stopped to talk to the teenager first. They apologized for watching and doing nothing. They congratulated him. They asked to follow his journey on social media. They wanted to be part of his story now. The officers got in their cars and left without giving him any citations. The teenager stood alone on the street next to Phoenix, holding Vin Diesel's business card in one hand and the keys to the toolbox in the other. He got back in his car and sat in the driver's seat. He looked at the cracked windshield, the worn seats, the cardboard sign that said Phoenix on the dashboard. An hour ago, this car had felt like a symbol of his failure. Now it felt like a symbol of his potential. He started the engine and it coughed and sputtered just like always. But somehow it sounded different now. It sounded like possibility. It sounded like the beginning of something great. 6 months passed quickly. The teenager graduated from high school with good grades despite his crazy work schedule. He reduced his hours at work so he could focus more on his studies, knowing that the scholarship was waiting for him. He stayed in touch with Vin Diesel's team, sending pictures of Phoenix's restoration progress. With their guidance and help with parts, the car was transforming. New paint, fixed engine, repaired interior. It was slow work, but it was happening. When he finally finished the restoration, Phoenix was beautiful. The car gleamed in the sunlight. The engine purred perfectly and every system worked the way it should. He sent the final pictures to Vin Diesel, and true to his word, the movie star posted them on his social media. The post went viral immediately. Millions of people saw the before and after pictures. They read about the teenager who worked 3 jobs, who was humiliated during a traffic stop, who was defended by a celebrity, and who never gave up on his dream. The comments were overwhelmingly positive. Thousands of people shared their own stories of struggle and perseverance. Thousands more sent messages of encouragement and support. The teenager started the automotive program at the technical college and excelled. His instructors were impressed by how much he already knew from teaching himself. He made friends with other car enthusiasts. He got a part-time job at a prestigious restoration shop that had seen his story online. Everything was falling into place. One day, a year after the traffic stop, he was working in the shop when he got a phone call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Is this the Phoenix guy? A voice asked. Yes, this is him, the teenager answered, confused. I saw your story online. I own a custom car design company, and I'm looking for young talent. People with passion, with dedication, with a story. Would you be interested in an internship? The teenager's hand shook as he held the phone. More opportunities. More doors opening. All because he had worked hard. Because he hadn't given up. Because one person had believed in him when he needed it most. Yes, he said. Absolutely yes. As he hung up the phone and looked around the shop at all the beautiful cars being restored, he thought about that day on the street. He thought about how low he had felt, how humiliated, how close he had come to giving up, and he thought about Vin Diesel's words. You're not small. You're going to be great. He was on his way. And he would never forget the lesson he learned that day. When he became successful, when he had his own shop or his own business or his own career, he would help others the way he had been helped. He would see potential instead of limitations. He would lift people up instead of tearing them down. That was the real lesson. That was what family meant. That was how you changed the world. One person at a time. One act of kindness at a time. One moment of belief at a time. Phoenix had risen from the ashes, and so had he.